Hi, I'm Malika Bilal filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, responding to the call of duty, we'll look at the debate over compulsory military service. Our digital producer, Omar Badar, is here, and he's looking out for your live feedback. And this, of course, you and I know, and stream viewers know, this was inspired by a show we did not too long ago on the Baltics.
That's right. It was about the perceived Russian threat on the Baltics and how countries in the region were reacting to it. Take a look at my screen. Lithuania is one of those countries that reacted by reinstituting military conscription. This is one of many facts you can learn by joining us on Twitter and following our Twitter account. And of course, you can also join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream, and we'll try to get to those tweets during the show.
I'm Miroslav Mitrofanov. I'm a politician from Latvia representing Russian minority of Latvia, and I'm in the stream.
Should military service be mandatory? Security concerns are pressuring some nations to build their armies. But for young people who aren't necessarily planning on a military career, conscription could have a major impact on their lives. Supporters of compulsory service say the practice is necessary for national defense. Lithuania just restarted their conscription system for men ages 19 to 26. Last year, both Qatar and the UAE introduced mandatory service for men. And this year, Norway started conscripting women 18 years of age. Other countries with a long history of service requirements include Israel, Switzerland, and South Korea. So today we want to examine how young recruits from around the world are responding to the call of duty. With us to discuss this, Kypros Damashauskas, a conscript who supports his country's return to a military draft. In Istanbul, Oner Arem, a journalist and member of the Conscientious Objection Association in Turkey. He avoided military service in his country. In Jerusalem, Sahar Vardi, she was jailed for her refusal to serve in the Israeli military. And in Singapore, Graham Ong Webb is a senior army officer in the Singapore Armed Forces Reserves. He's also a research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Welcome to all of our guests. Now, Kypros, let's start with you. You had just moved back to Lithuania from London when you were drafted. Tell us what happened.
Well, I saw my name on the list, and that's pretty much it. And I went to the recruiting, office. I gave myself in. I applied for all the papers for medical procedures. They checked me and they wished me a good service.
So the list,
now,
where
right
was it?
now,
Online? Is this an online list, Kypros?
Yeah, it's an online list. There's a website. It's all official. There are 36,000 people on there, and top 3,000 are the lucky ones.
So what was going through your mind? I mean, I heard you say the lucky ones. What was going through your mind when you saw your name? Was there any hesitation? What were you feeling?
No, I just set my mind to it just in a sec, and I was really, really happy. It all sorted out. There were no doubts, and now I'm ready. I'm waiting for it.
Sahar, I know your story is a little bit different. What happened when you were called?
So at the age of 17, I had the first order to come to do tests with the military and so on. And already at that point, I knew that I'm not going to serve in the military. As far as I was concerned, understanding what the Israeli military does, occupying millions of people and not giving them their basic rights, was something that I knew that I couldn't join. So when my draft date did expire at the age of 18, I refused my military service. I was imprisoned for 2 months and then another 3 months in detention as a result of that.
How soon after you refused did you report to jail, or were you jailed? Can you explain that process for us?
Sure, I actually turned myself in on the day that I was supposed to be drafted, and instead of joining the military like the rest of my peers, I declared that I will refuse and was tried, sentenced, and jailed the same day.
What was jail like?
It's a military prison. I can't tell you that it's the best experience of my life. Obviously, the idea of taking one's freedom away is something that is very disturbing, especially when you're in that situation as an 18-year-old child. But on the other hand, I can say that it hasn't been the worst experience, and more than that, for me at least, it was very important to actually stand my grounds and not spend the next 2 years of my life doing something that I not only don't believe in, but that harms others.
Malika, we're hearing online from people who themselves avoided military service. We have Ferret here, a Turkish citizen in the US. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Hello, I'm from Turkey. I left my country 6.5 years ago, came to the United States to study, and I'm about to finish my third college degree in art. I've never been able to go back to my country because I'm missing in action, and I think the military service shouldn't be mandatory in any circumstances, because the military is a $1 million business and shouldn't be funded by young people's lives.
Oh, Nur, you avoided service as well, but your story is a little bit different. You did not escape the country. Can you tell us about why you chose to stay?
Of course, I completely agree with Ferit, and I decided to stay and give here a struggle for the right of conscientious objection in our association. So the day I got my call letter, I sent an email to the chief of staff and asked which methods of torture they are going to use on me, because back then, 5 years ago, they were torturing the conscientious objectors in military prison. But luckily, the procedure changed now. Although they have the chance to imprison people, they just for now use monetary fines instead of jailing people.
Oh, Noor, I mean, you say that so nonchalantly, but you basically knew that torture was a potential response to this, and you asked what kind of military torture? Take us through how one gets the nerve to do that and to feel okay with turning this down and objecting.
I had the feeling of that I should give this struggle because it is a basic human right, which is also secured by the European Court of Human Rights decisions. And if nobody gives a struggle for this right, then we won't be able to use it. This is why I wanted to use it, and I got support of my conscientious objector friends, and we were acting together, and we were making street actions together. So I wanted to ask this question to the army, and of course I couldn't get any logical reply.
And you were smiling as you said that. So you have heard 3 different stories, different countries. I want to give our viewers a glimpse at how this process differs from country to country. So take a look at this on my laptop. Now this is Mexico, where they draw black and white balls from a lottery to determine which 18-year-old males will serve in the national military service. You can see him holding up a white ball there. Now a black ball means you'll be a reservist, and a white ball means you'll have to report directly to a military unit. You can see Kipras smiling as he sees that, and Graham, you're nodding at it with a little bit of acknowledgement. Graham, what was your story?
Well, my story is a little bit different. We don't have the ballot in terms of whether you get to serve or not serve in the military or in the reserve. In Singapore, it's constitutionally required at the age of 16 and a half and above. You can get called up for a period of 2 years. And you serve those full 2 years before you move on with your life. And thereafter, you could serve up for another 10 years in the reserve. It hasn't always been like that. There was a period when it was 3 years, so it was a lot longer. And then it was streamlined to 2.5, and now it's 2 years. So it's not too bad. 24 months is still a considerable period of your life or length of time. But I think we still are able to get on with doing other things and not just being defined as being a soldier, as being your key identity in Singapore.
So we're hearing from people online who see some violation of basic freedom in requiring people to go to the military. We have Ice Queen over here who says, of course, military service should not be mandatory. Nobody should have to pick up a gun if they don't want to. And then we have Kalu over here who says military service should be voluntary. Military service is a sacrifice, and no one should be forced to make a sacrifice. Kipras, what do you say to people who think that making it mandatory is violating people's freedom of choice?
You can always move to another country. It's a very simple fact. If you don't want to defend and protect your home, to protect your way of life, you just can leave. I chose to stand my ground, and I will do that until until my service is done.
I have a comment on this, Kipras. I think nobody should be forced to leave their country because of conscription, because they have the right to live on the city they born, on the country they born. So it is not a choice that they have to be made.
You know,
and
in most of the cases,
I would like to.
Sahar, go ahead, and then we'll hear from Kip.
Yeah, sorry, I just would like to add to that it's not only a question of what is the choice and if it is a human rights violation or not, but also a question of what we see contribution to our society, because Kipras, you kind of understand that this is what contribution to society is, while from my perspective, in order to live in the country I live in, I want it to be safe, I want it to be peaceful, and joining the military does exactly the opposite. It hurts my own society, it hurts the reality that I live in. And so for me, the contribution to society that I can give if I want to stay here and live here is not to serve in the military.
I honestly doubt that. But as I was saying, if you're not going to serve in your own military in face of emergency, you may have to serve in enemy's army, or just have even worse, as you say, human rights violations. We have neighboring country, Russia, that attacked Ukraine, and there's a terrible war raging on. You've got things going on in Syria, and I believe that military servicemen and servicewomen are protecting you from that danger, and that be way worse than what you have now.
Well, it's interesting to see that statistically there's absolutely no correlation between conscription and countries that are involved in conflict. So there's actually no connection between are we trying to protect ourselves and do we have conscription? And it's interesting to hear, for instance, the Israeli military saying that as far as efficiency is concerned, they would much rather be a professional military. And if you actually look at what the reason for conscription, for instance, in Israel is, it's much more a social issue. It's the fact that when there is conscription, it's much harder to criticize the military and its actions, and in many ways it kind of closes us in a mindset that is military-oriented, although the actual military need for it, again, as far as the military is concerned, they would rather be a professional military.
So Graham, I'd like you to weigh in here. You heard what Sahar said about it being a contribution to society and there being other ways to contribute to society. What do you make of a military in which there might be members who don't actually want to be there? Do you think that contributes to a strong military and then a strong society, or does the opposite?
Well, that's a good question, Maliki. I think it's something that Singapore is still coming to terms with. I think the general consensus in Singapore, 50 years on since our independence and since we've established a conscript force, is that national service has done a general good for the society. We live in a relatively peaceful region. We don't have any defined adversaries or threats, but we feel that over the long term, it's helped to just forge bonds between citizens. We have a multi-ethnic society, and we feel that the national service helps to transcend boundaries between groups. So we think that's pretty good for us in general. And we don't only just gain a military skill set in the Singapore Armed Forces, a lot of other things that we do as well. And increasingly, the conversation between the military and the society has become more two-way. People are now asking for relevant skills. So if they're serving for 2 years, they're saying that, look, it's not just about learning to have better field craft skills, but can you also give us skills and other things that we can find use in life when we leave the military, when we become civilians again. So this conversation, I think, has become rather dynamic, especially over the last 10 years.
So we have people who are actually... Yeah, we have people, I'll get to you in just a moment. We have people who are debating the impact of military service on individuals, and we have quite a range here. We have Ali, who says, at least for a short time, it instills some kind of discipline and morality among the youth. But then we also have Imran, who disagrees completely, says military service turns vain, misguided youth into heartless, flag-worshipping killing machines, which really begs the question that Imali raises, is psychologically, does life go back to normal after people serve in the military? Sahar, what is your take on this from people that you know who did serve in the military? Do people change through that experience?
People obviously change. It's also important to say that when you have people join the military at the age of 18, these are very formulating years. And people, a lot of my friends who have served in combat in more conflictual areas have come out with a lot of trauma. There's a lot of PTSD that people don't talk much about, but it's not only about that, it's also about being in a system for 2 or 3 years where you're used to taking orders, which means that as a society, we are a much more, yes, disciplined society, but I would also say obedient, much less able to criticize what the military does, what the government does, which obviously has huge social effects. I would also just like to touch a little bit on the gender issue because we often avoid it when we talk about conscription. Usually talking about conscription is a male-dominated discourse because most militaries only conscript men. And this also, in Israel, where we do conscript women, you can see that still militaries are masculine systems that teach men how to be very masculine men and how to value those kind of values. Yep. It's an area with a huge amount of sexual harassment, all militaries, and if you force women into that, then you're forcing them into being sexually harassed, and obviously this will also have effects on civil society afterwards.
Some strong statements there. Sahar, I'm actually glad that you brought that up because I want to show everyone something now. That is a question that people are debating, whether a country that has the draft should require women to serve the same as men. So I want you to take a look at this YouTube video. It's from an angry resident of Finland, and it's about the mandatory military service and gender equality.
So I'm 19 years old and I live here in Finland. And we have a compulsory military service. We get preached that we live in this equal society where men and women have the same rights. But then comes this military service. What is it? Now all of a sudden, based on your gender, you have to work for your country for 6 months and you get held back while women get to go to school, get to study, and they're essentially getting a year head start to life. Well, we're being stuck in army.
Stuck in the army. So Kipras, do you think more people should have to share that burden?
Yeah, we are all citizens. But on the other hand, I'm looking forward for the military just to get more skills I can adapt in life. There is not only combat, there is psychological warfare, there are things related to IT, to logistics. So there's a lot of you can apply in your civil career, in your everyday life. There's a first aid, there are driving skills, and there are things that you learn how to use the drill, how to follow the things in extreme situations, how to get out and save others. So let's look at the benefits.
I have a comment to make here. Well, we can learn all these skills without the military service as well, if we want to. But the fact that people are forced to military is affecting a big part of the society. And unlike Lithuania and Singapore, we see this reality in Israel and Turkey, which wages war, a civil war with its own population. In Israel, it's the Palestinians. In Turkey, it's the Kurdish people. So there are war crimes that are being done during these wars. And people don't want to be a part of these war crimes. And forcing people to take a part in a war crime is, I think, it can't be forgettable.
Oh, Onur, people online are raising a different kind of inequality issue within the military. We tweeted this out, showing that Turkey, you can avoid military service there by paying a certain fee, $8,700 to avoid military service. This brings up this tweet by Michael, who says it should never be a pay a fee to get out of service. This encourages the wealthy to avoid service. Do you think that people who are less financially well off are sharing a disproportionate burden of serving the country?
Of course, the rich people can pay this amount, but that $8,000 is nearly a yearly income for a Turkish citizen. And it's impossible for a poor young person to pay this price. So they are forced to take credits from banks, and they are being indebted so that they can be citizens who don't dissent and who accept all the possible work options just because paying this debt for many years.
And of course, if you don't pay and you object, I'm interested in then what happens in that space on what happens when you refuse and the price that you then have to pay. Zahar, do you want to pick up on that, the price of refusal? Has it affected your relationships with other people? What do people in society say when they know that you didn't serve time in the military?
Obviously, in a very militarized society where that's the standard, if you choose not to do that, you, in many ways, kind of take yourself out of society. Not only because people have a lot of political disagreements with it, but also just on a personal basis, the same sentiment of people saying, you know, I spent 2 or 3 years of my life, I gave up that time. The fact that you didn't, in many ways, kind of makes you a parasite. And people obviously don't necessarily agree with that. That said, I think that is the price of activism and resistance wherever you are, whether it's around conscription or any other form of something that you believe strongly enough in and that you want to see your society change in. It means that the society at first will definitely have negative reactions to it and won't understand it. That's how change comes in all societies.
Graham, what about in Singapore?
Yeah, Singapore is quite different. I must say that I totally respect the views of Onur and Sahar. I think it's hard to generalize whether or not military conscription is something that should or should not be supported. I think it depends on the geopolitical and I suppose cultural and historical realities of where you come from. In Singapore, it's just something where we've never had to take a chance. We simply can't take a chance on. We are a very small country. A very small population of only 5 million people, of which 3.5 million are Singaporeans, just 700 square miles in size. That's the size of Manhattan City. And so this is something that Singaporeans feel that we've got to carry the burden among ourselves in defending the nation. We've learned to live with it. Not all of us are entirely happy with it because it is imposed on us. But I think what I really applaud is the fact that I think civil society and government has been able to establish a conversation where we've been able to find a middle ground of sorts, where the military doesn't become an overarching feature in your life. So it's something that doesn't really drag us down too much. It's something that we used to spend a lot more energy on in the past, but clearly there are other ways to contribute to economic, to societal growth.
Right.
It's not just about the military, and I think we've been able to.
I just want to touch on a base because we're running a bit short on time on something that was mentioned earlier about the quality of the military when people are drafted. You have Kila who says military service quality is compromised. Best to have people who enlist because it's their wish to do so, otherwise it would be inexperienced. And emerging Equity who says my country Poland used to have military conscription. I'm against it and believe that the strongest army is a professional one. Kipras, are you concerned at all that if people join the military not because they really want to, but feel forced to be there, that you're compromising the effectiveness of that military?
No. We had professional military service for quite a few years, and it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient enough. We need people who can carry guns, who can not only fight, but who can help civilians, and it's a good thing. As I mentioned before, it's not only fighting, it's also doing all the background jobs, all the psychological, maybe support things, and logistics. And in the end, maybe at the very beginning you may not want to, but I believe most of the guys will love it after those 9 months.
Kipras, I know that some of our other guests will have something to say about that, and so we're going to hear from them in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, on the next show, we look at the battle over a giant telescope planned on sacred land in Hawaii. It'll kick off our Stream Science Week, where we'll use your ideas from our open editorial meeting. First, the post show. Welcome back. This is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about military conscription and its social impacts. Let's get back to that conversation. I want to talk about duty and how duty is viewed in different ways. Onur, what is duty to you? Duty to your country, of course, that is.
It completely depends on the person, in my opinion, because everybody has different skills and different wishes in the life. So they should decide about their duty on their own. It's not state's job to impose a duty on an individual. And also, I'd like to remind Kypros that both of our countries are European countries which signed European Convention on Human Rights. So by this convention, conscription is illegal. It can't happen in any European country. This convention doesn't allow. And it's not only the convention itself. European Union and United Nations have recommendations for countries which accept conscientious objectors from different countries as a refugee. So both of these intergovernmental organizations think that conscientious objectors living in a country with forced conscription, they have the right to go and settle in different countries because this is a real human rights violation.
So, Onur, is it because of those conventions that you are comfortable staying in Turkey?
Sorry?
Is it because of those conventions that you mentioned, human rights, that you're comfortable staying where you are even though you are an objector?
No, it's not for only those conventions. It's because I want to live in Istanbul, in my hometown. This is the main reason. But of course, these conventions give me legal help and security, more secure feeling compared to, for example, living in Israel.
Well, Kypros, you heard Onur mention you. I want to get your thoughts on what he said, but also on what duty is to you. Is it serving in the military?
It's protecting my home and my family, my friends, and beliefs I stand for. And on the other hand, he mentioned human rights, and I've got a constitutional right and a constitutional duty to defend my country that raised me and protect my family that invested so much time and effort and everything into me and made me the person I am. And if you don't want to serve your country, if you don't want to be a decent citizen, you can always just move away, as you mentioned. And
I think nobody should be forced to move away, but as a decent citizen who feels such a duty, then you should be able to do your duty. But if a decent citizen doesn't feel such a duty, I think you wouldn't get any advantage of forcing an unwilling person to defend with a gun in his hand.
So we actually have
more than that. I think it's important to say what do you mean when you say protecting your country? You keep talking about the responsibility to protect your country. As far as I'm concerned, that's what I'm doing. I think that the protection of my country has to do with peace accords and diplomatic means rather than military solutions. I think that specifically my country has proven that. The only times that we've actually managed to have neighboring countries stop being a threat was when we had peace accords with them, not when we waged war against them or had a strong enough military to fight against them. And so if I want to protect my country, on the contrary, I should refuse military service. I should make sure that as many people do that as possible in order to force my state to actually look for peaceful means rather than run to military solutions that we all know worldwide are not sustainable.
And Kypros, before I give you a chance to respond, we have another Lithuanian here online. We have Taras, who says, bringing back conscription was not difficult because consent within society was manufactured by the media, which is bombarding society with fear-mongering. And then we have this video comment from Yurgis. Take a listen to this.
Hi, I'm Yurgis from Lithuania. I was conscripted to military, and I disagree with this conscriptions, and I think that a lot of people also disagree with this because the decision was made behind closed door. And nobody gives any good reason why the conscriptions will help the national security. On the other hand, the opposition is being silenced by different methods, but mainly by saying that all the opposition is a Russian threat.
So, Kypros, for people who do, they're Lithuanian, they care about their country, but they just disagree with government policy about reinstituting this, are they to you any less Lithuanian?
It's a hard thing to say, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe they're just confused or idiots. Can I say that?
I think you just did. I think you just did. So when you are in conversations with other Lithuanians, because I know, of course, there have been citizens of Lithuania who have not been for this, I'm wondering what those conversations look like. Do you have friends who have pushed back or who've said, I don't want to join the military? Do you get into those kind of discussions, Kipras?
Yeah. It's a common thing. It's an everyday thing. I've got colleagues at work that they're shaking. They don't want to join. They don't want to get drafted, and I don't mind. Honestly, I don't mind serving instead of them. I don't mind doing double service for them. I will defend their right to do so, because we've got an enemy, a big enemy from the east. There's a Russia with 150 million people, and we had a state with 3 million people, with nearly 3 million people. And when they come like 2-3 times once in 100 years, we got concentration camps and things far worse than 9 months in a military barracks.
Onur, I want you to pick up on something, or Sahar actually, either of you, I want you to pick up on something that Kipras said. And he said, I don't mind the people who don't want to join. I will defend their right to do so. Will you concede that you need people like that who say that they are doing this for your benefit? Sahar?
I just want to first say something about something else that Kipras was saying, was this idea that more or less if we don't serve in the military, we'll go back to concentration camps. And that's something that, I mean, on the discourse level, I can very much relate to, because that is what the discourse is in Israel, obviously, with the history of Jews with concentration camps. But for me, this is one of the absurdities.
My family to concentration camps.
I completely understand that history, but what I'm saying is the absurdity of saying that if you won't now have more soldiers, then that is where it's going. While, first of all, international politics have changed a lot since, but more than that, every single person who stood in concentration camps from the guards side of things were soldiers, most of them conscript soldiers. So maybe the battle against conscription, if it would have been stronger in other places, then the other side of it would have looked very differently. And that's, for me, where this discussion really should go, because we need to remember conscription is not about what you do in your own country only. It's about later on what your military does in other places and what is your moral responsibility for that. And that needs to be the discussion. And if we're talking about a worldwide view, then obviously abolishing conscription everywhere would definitely be the best thing to prevent concentration camps in the future.
I'd like to add a comment, a quote from Einstein at this point. He said, the pioneers of a warless world are the young men who refuse military service. And I completely agree with Sahar that when we look at the history also, the wars don't bring any good to people. It's only good for weapon producing companies, trading companies, and the governments. They always benefit from these wars, but it's never the people who benefit from these wars. So in my opinion, we shouldn't fight the government's wars at all.
So we have a comment actually online that kind of puts a different spin on things. We have Dawood Walid who tweeted in saying, if there was mandatory draft, irrespective of economic status, our country, he's in the US, would be less likely to go into armed conflicts. Graham, I want to throw this to you. Do you think that if all of society shares the burden of being in the military, that somehow these decisions of going to war would become, would be taken more seriously, that this could actually be a positive thing to reining in some of the military conflict excesses that could happen otherwise?
Well, I suppose it could. I mean, in Singapore, because 80% of our military force is made possible by people who are conscripted. I think society as a whole can actually have a significant say about conflicts in the region. I think because of the way we're set up, we take it very seriously. So it's not something that we're not trigger happy. We don't take it lightly. War is always a last resort. We understand it's an extremely ugly affair. In the long haul, I suppose I could see Singapore society wanting to do away with national conscription. Should it be possible? But right now we don't see that quite happening. But still, I think what I'm trying to say is that the stakes are pretty high, and I think because of the fact that all of us are in it together.
Kipras, I saw you reacting a little bit earlier, and so I know you have something on your mind. What are you thinking?
Well, Honor kept mentioning government as if there is some secret organization to be blamed. I believe this country and this government that is running Lithuania is mine. I own it. It's my country and it's my government.
Well, when you disagree with your government,
they're there
you
because
may not
of me.
have the same feeling. I mean,
Well,
when I look at the war in Kobane, for example, the people who are living there are defending their lands from ISIS, and people are having a war against ISIS with very small guns, and they are doing their best to defend their land, and I support them because it's a war which they are doing just for defending their land. But it's not a government imposing them to do. So it's their own decision, and I think defending their own city, own homeland is something very honorable, unless it is imposed by a higher authority to you.
Well, yes, Kipras, I know that you want to respond to that, but I think that we've heard your view on that, which caused Onur to then give us his view. So I want to end us with just a little round robin. I want you to answer this question that I posed a little bit earlier but didn't get an answer to, and I want to know all of our panel's views on duty. So if you could wrap that up in each a sentence or two as we close out our show here. Kipras, how do you view duty for yourself to your country?
I can see it as it's not something special. It's a natural thing, and in a year or two, everyone will be doing it, and it will be a part of daily routine. Yeah.
Onur?
I think every person should decide if they.
Onur, you gave me that answer earlier, and of course, ever the journalist, I knew you would, but I actually want to hear what you think your duty to Turkey is.
For now, I feel like my duty is changing the government in this election on this weekend.
Okay, Sahar?
I think my duty to society here, and here it's important for me to say not just Israeli society here, but also Palestinian society, as almost half of the city I live in is Palestinian. My duty is to do anything I can to make the conflict end and to end the Israeli occupation of the Palestinians, and to have my society one that I can be proud of its moral standards.
Graham?
Well, I can't speak for other Singaporeans, but I see my duty as including my contribution to military service, and I've done that for quite a few years now, and also as a person who's an educator in the military college here in Singapore, to also raise the level of awareness among our military personnel about the responsibilities that they have and the value system that they ought to bring in being morally and ethically responsible in their conduct.
Well, you heard it here first. I want to thank all of our guests, Kipras Damashoskas, Onur Erem, Sahar Vardi, and Graham Ong Webb. Before we go, what is the community saying?
We have closing thought of people who disagree on whether military service should ultimately be mandatory. You have David, who says if it is necessary, because a fundamental part of any democracy is that you may have to fight for your freedoms. On the other hand, Dandelion says no, I do not support flags or nationalism. Earth service, on the other hand, is what should be mandatory.
Earth service. I like that.
Would be interesting
It
thought.
could be the topic of another show.
Yep.
Well, on the next AJ stream, we're going to explore the space between science and spirituality and the battle over a giant telescope planned on sacred land in Hawaii. It's part of our stream Science Week. Until then, we'll see you online.